Good. All right. Thank you all for your patience. Still working out these technical bugs, but I'm so grateful and appreciative to my brother who is holding it down. And so, I'm going to take a breath to regroup and ask my father, who's the elder in the space, we have permission to proceed. Okay. So grateful to have my dad here, and I'm so grateful to be able to come and do this again, and want to just recognize and send love to my husband in his absence, and thank him for his love and prayers that he is sending my way, which is fortifying me. And also wanting to give recognition to our community priest, Nana Afi Inyo, in her absence as well, and just sending love and gratitude to those who are here, my family, friends, community members. Thank you so much. Um, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And just to settle myself and to set the atmosphere, just going to offer a song that grounds me in this time. And so I'll just begin. Lead me, guide me along the way. For if you lead me, I shall not stray. Oh, let me walk each day with thee. Lead me, oh Lord, lead me. Lead me, guide me along the way. For if you lead me, I shall not stray. Oh, let me walk each day with thee. Lead me, oh Lord, lead me. So, today we are discussing part 2 of the spiritual liberation of Blackness. And if you saw the poster or the flyer or the posts, there was a subtitle, Exploring Spiritual Attack, Exploring Spiritual Identity, and Exploring Spiritual Reclamation. And so the message that is coming through from God, from the ancestors, is that spiritual reclamation is what is necessary for us in this time. That in order to have Black spiritual liberation, there must be a Black spiritual reclamation. And what does that mean? That means a reclaiming of Black spiritual practices that have been lost, that have been put to the side, that have been covered up, that have been lied about, that have been demonized. Because in that reclamation, therein lies the healing, therein lies the restoration, therein lies the deliverance, therein lies the unification, therein lies the restoration of self-knowledge and self-awareness in that active reclamation of what is already ours, the Black spiritual practices. And so spiritual reclamation is needed. But why do we need the spiritual reclamation in the first place? And so here we come into talking about the spiritual attack. And this is not something that I want to belabor because it does talk about things that are painful, the painful past that we have experienced and that our ancestors have experienced. But I want to talk about it just a little bit to make it clear and make it plain. So a spiritual attack is something that is intentional. The spiritual attack that happened against Black people was something that was intentional. It wasn't just a side effect or something that happened by happenstance because of colonization or enslavement. It was a spiritual attack. It was an intentional attack. There was an evil motivation in order to attack the Black spirit within us, within our ancestors. So there was a plan. There was something that was contrived in order to do this. Right? And so you may say, well, how did they attack our ancestors spiritually? Well, it first happened by force, right? So our bodies were brutalized. And as we know, the bodies carry the spirit. The bodies carry the emotion. The bodies are the vessel that allows the spirit to interact in this environment. And so how do you get to the psyche? How do you get to the spirit? It is through the body. That's one way. Right? And so the bodies were attacked. The intentional attack was by force and by violence. Day in and day out, every second, every minute, the bodies of our ancestors were brutalized. And until there was a crack, right? A crack in the spirit, the crack in the psyche of our ancestors, right? There becomes an injury, right? When you are enduring brutalization, inhumane practice, terrorism against your bodies, against your psyche, day in and day out, there is going to be a crack. There's going to be an injury. There's going to be something that happens, something that changes within your spirit as you continue to experience living in hell on earth day in and day out. It was an intentional attack. Why? Why would they attack the spiritual aspect of Black people? Why would they attack the spirituality of Black people? Well, you would have to imagine that if Black people were the oldest people, Black people were the first people, that means Black people were the highest spiritual people. And then those who come afterwards see what Black people do, see the harmony in which Black people live, see the things that Black people have built, see the knowledge that Black people have, and want to understand that, not understand it, but capitalize on it, right? Want to position themselves above, because in some form or fashion, it caused them to feel inferior. Who is them? I'm talking about white folks, just to be clear, right? And so when you want to position yourself in a space where you don't belong, then you have to do something to those who are in the space that you want. And so you have to attack them. You have to brutalize. You have to do something to remove them out of the way so that you can put yourself in this space. And so it was an intentional attack, right? On the most powerfully spiritual people on the planet, in order to subdue, in order to suppress, in order to repress, ultimately in order to control, right? So that they can extract and utilize the spiritual powers of Black people for their own gain. It was an intentional attack. It's not anything by happenstance. I hope that's clear. And so in the spiritual attack, we have spiritual injury, spiritual harm, spiritual trauma, and spiritual confusion. So much so that we as Black people began to perpetuate the attack. We become the assailants to our own selves. We become the ones who pass down the messaging of harm from generation to generation, not because we wanted to do that, but because it is the response that happens when you have been injured. It is the response that happens when you are trying to survive. So the terms demonize, the terms heathen, the terms pagan, the terms savage, the terms ungodly, those turn from white terminology in describing Black spiritual practices to the same terminology that some Black people use to describe Black spiritual practices. That's a problem. Because now the anti-Blackness that white people use as an attack against us, we now perpetuate on ourselves. It's not our fault. But once we know better, we must do better. And so it was an intentional attack to cause intentional spiritual harm, spiritual injury, and spiritual confusion. so that we would perpetuate this attack ourselves, so that we would turn away from those things that were natural to us and turn towards something that was outside of us. That we would reject those things that are natural to our very core and turn to something that is outside of us. That we would even adopt religions as an identity. That we would call Christianity or Islam or any religion. I'll deal with those two main ones because those are the main ones where we find Black people have been colonized and now mostly practice. But the spiritual confusion, the spiritual harm, and the spiritual injury has left voids, right? Being taken away from your homeland and being taken away from your native tongue, being taken away from everything that you know, leaves a void. And so what are we left to do but try to cling to something that would give us some sort of humanity, that would hopefully allow the assailants to see us as human, because we're all supposed to be equal, right, in the eyes of God. That's what was supposed to happen, right? If Black people became Christian, then white people shouldn't have had an issue based on the tenets of Christianity. And so you have, out of the survival, you have our Black ancestors clinging to religion, unhealthily tethering to religion, finding identity in religion, false identity in religion. Why? Out of survival. Not because the soul needs to be saved. Our soul was fine before we came across white folks, really. But out of survival. I'm going to tell a story that I learned years ago when I was in high school. And it paints a picture of how certain things that people do, certain generations do for survival, how it gets passed down to generations without the context, without the reasoning. And so this then becomes a quote unquote tradition that people think they must uphold. They think it's right. They think it's good. But in all actuality, it's not. So the story goes, there was a grandmother who made the best pot roast. Okay. She made the best pot roast. Every time she made it, everybody loved it. And when she made it, she cut off the ends of the pot roast. Okay. Every time she made it, she cut off the ends. So as she continued to teach this to her daughters and her children, and they began to pass it down, of course, they always say, hey, you got to cut off those ends. That's how grandma did it. So you got to cut off the ends, and then you do whatever else you do. Well, years pass, decades come, generations come. A granddaughter is now preparing the same pot roast that her grandmother made. The grandmother is there. She's watching her do it. They're talking. She notices that her granddaughter cut the ends off of the pot roast. She said, why are you doing that? The grandmother asked the granddaughter, why are you cutting the ends off the pot roast? And the granddaughter's like, oh, what do you mean, Grandma? This is how we've always done it. This is how you did it. This is how you said to do it. This is how Mom said you did it, and this makes it taste the best. And Grandma said, oh, no, I guess I never told y'all. The only reason why I cut off the ends because the pan was small, and that's the only pan we had. All this time, generation after generation after generation, the family's been wasting pot roast, whatever it's made from. They've been wasting the meat because they didn't realize that all Grandma was doing was using what she had. She was doing the best with what she had. And she didn't provide the context. She didn't provide the reasoning. She was just in it, and she was just doing it. Well, when it comes to us Black folks, The reason why we had to move away, or the reason why those stories began to be told as if we don't do these Black spiritual practices, was out of a means of survival. Because if you could imagine, if our ancestors were caught performing their special rituals or their traditional practices, praying to their deities, honoring their ancestors, if they were caught doing that, they were publicly harmed. They were made a spectacle of. They were mutilated, brutalized in front of everybody. So if that becomes a regular practice and you start to internalize that trauma, then you begin to say, hey, we can't do this anymore. The context goes out the window because I'm just trying to make sure I survive another minute in this hell on earth. I'm just trying to survive being Black behind enemy lines. I'm just trying to survive. So I tell them, oh, we don't pray like that anymore. So I say, oh, we don't do these things, or I tuck these things aside, or I may cunningly and creatively incorporate this into the particular religion that they say I have to utilize. And so the story gets passed down that we don't do that. And maybe even a layer gets added on that that's demonic. And maybe even a layer gets added on that that's ungodly. But all the while, it's just because our ancestors were trying to survive the harsh environment that they were in. The attack is real. The spiritual harm is real, and it has passed down from generation to generation. The fear is real, and it passes down from generation to generation. And that's a real thing. They have shown studies on how harsh environments can impact one generation and cause generations down the line to exhibit the same type of physical response that their ancestors did. And they weren't even in those situations. It's called epigenetics. You can look it up. We'll probably talk about it at another time. But I'm just saying, the fear is real. And it has been passed down from generation to generation, genetically, spiritually, through story, right? Traditionally at this point now. And so it's time to root our identity back in Blackness. No longer can our identity be rooted in a religion. Last month, we talked about the expansiveness of Blackness. Right? Blackness has been around for a long time. Blackness is, was, and will always be. They really don't know how old Black people are yet. They know how old these religions are. Very modern. Even the most ancient forms of Christianity or Islam or any of the other man-made traditions are modern compared to how old the Black person is. So how then can our identity be rooted in a religion? It can't be. It's impossible. There is no capacity in any of these religions that can hold that of Blackness. A religion is not meant to be an identity. A religion is a tool for a spiritual divine being to utilize and exercise their spirituality in whatever tool they choose to use. So as a Black woman, I can use a verse out of the Bible if I need to get some stuff done. As a Black woman, I can use a verse out of the Holy Quran if I need to get some stuff done. Sorry, we have some technical stuff. As a Black woman, I am not limited. I am not limited in any capacity to use any spiritual tool that I want to or that I feel led to use. I can use something from Christianity. I can use something from Islam. I can do some meditation. I can do some herbalism. Why? Because I'm a Black woman. And that is where my power lies. It is in my Blackness, not in the religion. The religion is the tool. And we've been limited to one tool, most of us. And we've been trying to work this one tool, and some stuff is not getting done because we are only using one tool. And we think that's the only way that we can use. We can only do this Christian thing, and that's the only way it's going to work. Absolutely not. Because what was Black people doing before Christianity even came into the mix? What were they doing before the Holy Quran was even written and compiled? Black people were on here building things, healing, learning, expanding in harmony with nature, the cosmos, and everything in between. Black people knew God before any religion was even created. Why? Because Blackness is God and God is Blackness. Period. And so our identity must be rooted in our Blackness. Because what happens when you have an identity, when you have someone say, oh, I'm Christian and I'm Black. Oh, okay. Or I'm Islam, I'm a Muslim before I'm Black. Or I'm a Christian before I'm a Black man. I've heard somebody say that. Or I'm Christian and African. No, that doesn't make sense. You weren't born in a religion. You were born Black. Your DNA is Black. Your identity is in that blood, which is your DNA, which is Black. A religion, again, is something that you choose to use. It is a practice, not an identity. And what happens is there will always be a conflict because these particular religions that we use are Eurocentric. And so if it's Eurocentric, then it's anti-Black at its nature. And I'm not talking about ancient Christianity. There's some differences there, but that's not what most people practice. Most people are practicing Eurocentric Christianity. And so if you are practicing a Eurocentric version of a religion that is inherently anti-Black, and then you say you are a Black person, there will be some inevitable conflict between these two identities that one person says that they have. And what most often happens is that when there is a conflict, most people reject the Blackness and go toward the religion. And that is of detriment. And that is of detriment to our people. We cannot reject who we are. That is a spiritual confusion, a spiritual psychosis for us to say, I will reject who I am. I will reject that of my ancestors to cling to something that is inherently oppressing me and limiting me and doesn't fully contain who I am. Let me take a sip. So it is imperative for us to do the work, to be able to fully identify and be comfortable with identifying as Black, identifying fully in our Blackness and the divinity that is natural to us, and repositioning these particular religious tools for what they are, and seeing them through the lens of truth and fact, which is they are religious tools to be used at our disposal, not for us to identify as. And if anything within these religions sets itself up against Blackness, that is what we reject. We reject the anti-Blackness that comes out of these religions. That's what we do for Black people. Other people, I don't know. But for Black people, to reestablish ourselves, to heal ourselves of the spiritual injury, to fill the void, we must reject any and all forms of anti-Blackness wherever they are found, especially within religion. This is how we begin to reclaim who we are. This is how we begin to reclaim our spiritual power. This is how we begin to put the pieces together and restore ourselves, to erase the spiritual confusion, to reverse the product of the spiritual attacks. I don't know about you, but when I found out, like when I realized, oh, this was something that was intentionally done. Like the spiritual attack thing was something that they like. Whenever somebody comes for my family or comes for my people, I am up in arms. I'm like, oh, what? Oh, bet. Like I'm coming for you. There's no qualms about it. So when I realized that they came for us, when I realized the brutality in which they enacted this attack, you can't tell me nothing. I'm going to do everything I can to reverse what was done to my people. I don't care if it makes people upset. I don't care if it goes against the rules. I don't care if it goes against the narrative that we've been told. When you tell me and I see that someone has come for my people, I'm coming for you and I'm reversing everything. I'm doing everything within my power to tear it all up, to call it all out. Because ain't no way somebody gonna come for my great grandmama and I don't do nothing about it now when I figure it out. Ain't no way somebody gonna come for my people, cut off hands and limbs and mutilate just for us being Black. And I don't tear some stuff up to expose it. And I don't do what I can to reestablish us in our full Blackness. Ain't no way. That's what this is about. That's what is needed, is the reclamation. Because it is time out for us to be walking around in spiritual psychosis, spiritually confused, perpetuating this attack on our own selves. It's time out to be limited by whatever these narratives are within these religions. It's time out for being limited by fear. At least for us Black folks. Again, this is for us. It is a call to reclaim. What do we reclaim? We reclaim the practices that have been demonized. Divination, astrology, right? Seeing, people who are able to see, people who are able to dream, people who are able to hear. Having ancestral altars and ancestral veneration. Why would we ever believe that our ancestors are demons? Makes no sense. Yet that is what we say. It is time to reclaim these practices and reject the anti-Blackness that has come for these practices, that have kept us powerless, a people of less power. We would adopt an anti-Black rhetoric as if it's going to give us some type of power. Come on. Reclaiming the knowledge of the different African traditional practices. This allows us to reclaim our power our knowledge of self. And we have to do it together because that is how Black people do. We do things in the collective. We do things in community. And that is how our healing will take place, is in community. This active reclamation of our spirituality, of our spiritual practices, of our Blackness is where we will find our healing. I have one more story before I close. So my brother will remember this. Maybe some of y'all remember this movie, Space Jam, the original. With Michael Jordan, I think Patrick Ewing, Muggsy Bogues, Charles Barkley. There was one other guy. Oh, he was that tall white guy, huh? I don't remember him. Oh, okay. He said Sean Bradley. Okay. So if y'all remember Space Jam, you remember the premise of the story is eerily likened to what we're talking about here, right? So there was this alien, this non-human, who saw the power of these Black basketball players, right? And they saw how great and how magnificent and everything that they were able to do. And this non-human, this alien, wanted those powers, right? Wanted to enslave Michael Jordan and take the powers for himself and utilize them and put them in these other non-humans and make them these stars and utilize it for his own capital gain. Sounds familiar, right? So that's what the premise of this story was. This is Space Jam. What is this, 96? Something like that, right? And so we know that Michael Jordan had to utilize the Looney Tunes in order to beat the Monstars that had stolen the power of his friends. Okay? And so he did that to get the powers back. He got the powers back and he comes with this ball. And he goes to his friends who are just, they don't know what to do with themselves, right? Their powers are gone. What used to be on the inside of them is now outside of them, and they do not know how to operate. They're operating as shells of their former selves, right? They're operating at half capacity. They can't do what they would normally do because the essence of them has been taken from them. And so Michael Jordan, he gets it back. He gets it back and it's in this ball, and the ball looks all, funny. It's glowing. It has the swirls within it. Why? It has the powers in it. So it looks a little weird, but he says, hey, I got it. And they're like, what? They're like, yeah, all you got to do is touch this ball. It was a pause. You would think that they would run and jump and hug the ball because their friend got their powers back. Their friend got their essence back. It got their soul back, right? You would think that they would just run up and do whatever they could to get their hands on the ball, but they didn't. They paused. And their friend is like, Michael Jordan's like, hey, just touch the ball. All you got to do is touch it. And they're looking at it and they're looking around, and they're even though they've been operating as shells of themselves, they haven't been themselves since their powers got stripped from them. They're still scared. That tension is still there. That is prohibiting them from getting what they so desire. And it's right there, but because it looks a little strange, because it's a little different than what they're used to, they have a pause. They're contemplating remaining in this lower level of operation in which they are unhappy, in which they are depressed, in which they are not operating at full capacity. They're contemplating staying there versus touching the ball that has everything that they say they want back. And so finally, after some time, one of them finally, literally has to force himself to put his hand on the ball, and then everybody else does it afraid. There's somebody who pokes their little finger in there, and then they collectively finally put their hands on the ball. And as they all put their hands on the ball, then you start to see the transformation happening, right? What used to be inside of them that was now outside of them is coming back to its natural space. It has to reintegrate back into the bodies that they came from. So there's a little bit of a transformation, right? It takes a little bit of time. It might have been a little uncomfortable, right? Because they had to be restored. What was lost now had to be restored. And so they go through a little bit of a transformation there. But oh, when that transformation is complete, I'm talking about Space Jam, but when that transformation is complete, Muggsy Bogues starts doing everything that only Muggsy Bogues can do with the rock. Patrick Ewing goes and does a slam that only Patrick Ewing can do because they're back in their full selves. That power is back where it was supposed to be in the first place. And so when they finally got over that fear, when they finally moved past that tension, they were able to go back into their own selves and realize the capacity of which they got. And Patrick Ewing says, give me my powers back. He finally realized, oh, I got my powers back. Give me my powers back. And so that is what we're supposed to be saying here. We got to push past the fear. We got to push past the tension. We got to push past the limit. Put your hands on the ball and do it together collectively as we collectively reclaim what is ours, what used to be on the inside of us, what used to be there. Give me my soul back. Give me my powers back. Give it all back. Everything that the devil stole, God's giving it back. So, the spiritual liberation of Blackness comes from the spiritual reclamation of Blackness. Ashe, thank you. Whew.